qualifying score, but since I did dual enlistment, what happens is they kind of decide if they want you to be an officer or enlisted. So I took the officer test, the AFOQT, it's called. You can only take it, or at the time, you can only take it twice in your lifetime. They decided I made like just above the little qualifying thing, so they're like, we're gonna make you go enlisted. And I was like, okay, that figures. So I kind of got screwed there by my recruiter. I should have just commissioned and didn't not do enlist. But yeah, so I enlisted in the Air Force. I didn't know anything about what career field I want to go into. In fact, when I went to sign up for my jobs, they handed me a list of letters and numbers, essentially. One alpha this, one bravo this. And I looked at the guy like, I don't know what any of these things are. And he pulled me aside. He looked at my ASVAB and he was like, all right, you want this, 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 this. This one's cool. And he basically chose for me. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna trust this. I could have been really screwed. I'm lucky that guy actually liked me. He liked my ASVAB scores because he could have screwed me over. But getting a 1 off of 9 special missions aviation was a godsend over getting like maintenance or security forces, which
Mhm.
is military police. There's no telling what I could have got.
So going back a little bit though, I mean, how did your family react to you joining? I mean, did you talk to your family before you pulled the trigger completely, or
Oh God,
how'd
no.
that go?
I decided what I want to do for me. I decided I need to go military to get this experience, serve. It was also kind of like I mentioned before, I was gonna be a cop, so I could like give something to a community, serve in some aspect. So this was kind of my way of serving, you know, in some aspect. Um, and I went to my family, my parents, I think like maybe 2 weeks to a month after I started talking to a recruiter about it. And I just
Mhm.
told them like, yeah, I want to go military, and they just had to accept it. They're like, okay, well, that's probably what's best.
They didn't
They're
try
really
to talk you
supportive.
out of it or anything.
No, they're really supportive in whatever decision I make. If anything, they try to talk me. My dad tried to talk me into staying in because I think he thinks I'm doing really well in the military.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, my time to get out. It's my time to get out.
So after you recruiting and how do you feel? Leaving for boot camp for the first time. I mean, and what is basic training for the Air Force like?
It I didn't know what to expect. I was nervous. It's one of those new chapters you start in your life, similar to how you leave high school to go to college. You don't know what to expect. Obviously, you're excited for that. You leave college to go to your job. You're excited. You're nervous. This was a nervous that I knew I would like. There was nothing to look forward to. I was yeah. That's the best way to describe it. Is just nerves and uncertainty. In addition to that, I had gotten assigned as a special missions aviator, where I was going to go fly on planes. Um, and I had never flown on a plane in my life. My first flight was flying to basic. And luckily, like the first airplane I was on was this tiny little, like 20-man airplane going out of Shreveport to I think Houston or Dallas, one of the two. And I actually loved it. I love flying just as a passenger at the time. So,
That's a good way to find out if you have a fear or not,
oh yeah.
especially going into the Air Force.
Oh yeah.
So then, what's basic training like? I've heard stories that you guys get to get up around noon or so, train till 2, and then you go back to your barracks and hang out.
So like I won't even like contend. Obviously, I would assume it's not as much fun for like obviously Marines gonna have a lot rougher basic training. Army's probably a little worse. Air Force, it definitely wasn't fun. Um, I'd say just the lack of sleep is what sucked the most. And I know most people don't usually. It might be kind of graphic. Most people don't even use the bathroom until like a weekend because of the stress. People get clogged up. Um, for some reason, that's a detail I remember. Like everyone was like, "Hey, like I haven't done," and some people actually had to go. I know one kid. It was like 2 weeks in, he still hadn't gone number two. He had to go like have a procedure done. But but yeah, it's really just being able to get yelled at and just taking it, and you know that's the bulk of it.
So then, because you already have your MOS set up for the special aviations, you said.
Yeah, special missions aviator.
Yep. So does your pipeline in basic change at that point, or is that more when you get to AIT?
So everyone, no matter what job you're going into, unless you're going like a combat controller, like a boots on the ground kind of Air Force job, you're gonna have the same basic experience, whether you're going to finance, something desk job, or whether you're gonna go be a flyer. It's not until you're out of, those 8 or 7 weeks, whatever it is now, out of basic or boot camp, that you're gonna go to your technical school, your technical training for your specific job. Um, and then depending on what you're doing, you could be sent, you know, who knows where. Most flyers. So if you're a flyer in the Air Force, there's only one basic camp for the Air Force. You go to Lackland, San Antonio, Texas, and if you're a flyer, you have to go through a 3-level course where you learn the basics of flying and you prove that you're smart enough to do it, because not everyone is apparently, and they fail out of flight fundamentals. So that's your first step as a flyer, flight
Is that
fundamentals. And
would that be equivalent to getting like a pilot's license then? Commercial?
not quite. So we were enlisted. We're going to fly as load masters, special missions aviators. The few of us that did that, um, boom operators, people who do like refueling. So we were doing the enlisted side of flying. So not flying the plane, more like the engineering type, if you will, the grunt work.
Does the Air Force have their own schools? Hey, Casey, I'm Josh, by the way,
Hey, how's it
not
going?
Jennifer. As it says there. Now, you can call me Jennifer if you really want. But, if it's going to go any further than that, take me out to dinner first. So, like, is there? Do you guys? First off, I got to ask you this because I'm Army. I know Steve is Army. Do Air Force guys ever go? God damn it! I should have freaking joined the Army. Or
No,
because I know
not.
Army guys are always.
I've heard
Army,
that so much, and you hear it all the time. And it's one or two things when you meet like an Army or Marine guy. Uh, they usually have about the same attitude of either like they call you chair force and they kind of like, they make fun of you, or they say that they're like, man, I wish I would have gone Air Force.
yeah.
So it's two attitudes to that, which is always
I've never
funny.
heard an Air Force guy go, God damn it, I wish I would have joined the fucking Army. You know?
Absolutely none of them. Although I have seen, I know a guy who was Army for most of his career, and he switched to Air Force Reserves, I think, and he actually regrets it. He says that he gets paid more, and it's like nicer facilities in the Air Force, but he said the Army was much more organized, and like, as far as like doing stuff like paperwork and stuff, all that was like streamlined. And I can tell you, just trying to out process the Air Force at Herbert, and a lot of people had the same excuse of like COVID and whatnot, but it was a nightmare trying to figure out everything and what I needed to do and get done. So I've heard the Army has everything figured out, and they're more organized at times. So
That is false.
that's
I
it.
don't know who
Yeah,
told you
yeah,
that. Full
I
of
can
shit.
attest to it. Yeah.
I was waiting for you to say something, Steve.
It took me like 2 goddamn months to get out of the Army, and it was just, no, you need this signature before you can get this signature.
Right.
Wait, actually, you need to go to this place, and it was just me running all over Fort Carson for like 2 months so
You
that I
would
could
think
get
they'd
out.
have these processes streamlined with people leaving all the time, but it's a lot of like me calling an office, them not answering, or them telling me, "Oh, you need to call this number," and it is. I had a likewise a similar
And then you
experience.
find out that the office you need to go to is only open for an hour and a half, like 2 days a week. And you're
Yep,
like,
just imagine trying to do that
how
during
how is this
COVID
sustainable?
hours. Yeah,
I think there's probably more similarities than there are differences. So I
right.
don't know. Maybe one person out of 10 probably has a great experience. So I got a question for you. So like on Loadmaster, like do you guys go to some of the same schools as the Army? Because I know when I was at Fort Lee, which is like a lot where the rigging guys go, and I think the transportation. Yeah, because you go through Fort Lee and they got that big sign up there that says, "When you hear a mighty roar, this is the transportation corps," or some lame ass shit like that.
So I can't really address. I'm sure there are times when like those courses kind of like, cross over where Army teaches Air Force teaches Army, but I'm not really a load master. I can't claim it.
Yeah. No, I
I'm
was just
a,
saying, it's like if there's something similar along the way. I was just curious. That's all.
I know when I was when I was on Lackland, San Antonio, that's where security forces, our military police trained. And then there were Marines there who were in the same dormitory or barracks as us, and they were there learning their military police job with our security forces.
I had a lot of crayons.
Yeah, it was interesting to have them around. There were a couple of times where they kind of bumped heads with us, but
Yeah.
So you mentioned there's 3 phases to your training. What's phase 2 and phase 3 like?
so it depends on what you want to look as a phase. So you went through basic. From there, I went to flight fundamentals, which was just a 2 or so week course to wash out people. From there, I went to special missions aviator training, where I get my wings, which was geared toward, again, kind of a washout course. I think it had like a 60% washout or something like that. They just like fire hose you with information, for a day or two, and then you took a test on it. And then from there, we went to SEER up in Washington, which
Which
was a
is
jolly old time. Survival, evasion,
evasion.
resistance, and escape. Yep. Go up there to do what they do. And yeah, from there I came down to Herbert Field, where I started training on the aircraft itself, my specific aircraft, which for me was the Gunship, the U model, AC-130U, which took about, it depends on the pipeline, but for me it took about 6 to 8 months. But
Of just training.
yeah, you do like classroom stuff, and then you do ground trainers when you go out to the plane and you practice gun malfunctions and pre-flights and everything you need to do. And then you have so many flights where you have to learn. For us, the loadmaster job and the gunner job, before you check out and you go operational at the 4th SOS.
So then, what are your loadmaster, aerial gunner? I mean, what are your duties and what are you training for those
So
months?
the Air Force, in their ultimate wisdom, they got rid of the job of aerial gunner years ago, before I came in. And what they did, they were trying to help Manning. So they got rid of the job of aerial gunner and loadmaster on the AC-130 and combined them both into one job. So you had to learn both jobs. And they called it Special Missions Aviator, but we just still called ourselves aerial gunners. And on the J model, the new gunship, they also have to learn the engineer's job. So they're really learning 3 jobs. They don't have engineers on the J
Getting
model.
paid for one, I assume.
And get it paid for one. Yeah. So yeah, I forgot your original question, but they keep condensing.
I was just curious as to what your duties are and what you're training or what you're learning during that training process.
Right. So we learned the basics of a loadmaster's job, to where we calculate weight and balance of the aircraft. We're out front for starting engines to make sure the engines turn on. We'd be in the back. We check hydro lines, and we know the emergency procedures for like flap malfunctions and landing gear malfunctions. That's the loadmaster side. And we'd also scan for threats downrange in the bubble. And then as a gunner, your bread and butter is knowing gun malfunctions. You're loading the weapons, it's called putting them on the line. You would basically allow the weapons to aim where the sensor operator is aiming. And you're fixing the guns whenever they inevitably break, which was pretty common on the 40 millimeter.
So wait, you have 3 guns up on the AC-130U. So you have a 40 mil, and what are the other 2? Is there a howitzer?
They had a 105 millimeter, which was originally a Army field artillery gun. They strapped onto the aircraft. So you can literally feel, if you go up on the flight deck, whenever it goes off, you can feel the plane will slightly shift in the back from the cannon.
Mhm.
Then we have the 40 millimeter, which was originally a Navy anti-aircraft gun. This was the last thing, like last vessel, aircraft or Navy otherwise, that the 40 was on. So we were literally running out of parts. They don't make these parts anymore. They're all old. And now that the U model's retired, so is the 40 millimeter. So they have all this old ammo and stuff they don't know what to do with. Pretty funny. And then the 25 millimeter, which is essentially a giant Gatling gun, fired 1,800 shots per minute, give or take 100 shots. And that too is retired since the U model retired.
I've been joking with people this week, mentioning that I can be talking to you, and it's just, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall during the drunken conversation of, yeah, well, I can make an artillery can fly.
Yeah.
Here comes
They,
AC-130 Hugh.
Yeah, that's one of the jokes is that they've literally militarized math. Because if you think about firing a cannon, 10,000 feet in the air from like a mile or two out and having it hit directly on a target, while you're moving 200 knots in an orbit, I don't know who figured out how to make that precise, but
So what's it like being up there? I saw your pictures. It looked like you've done some combat missions, but I mean, just for training, it's not a compressed. Is it compression? The compartment?
no, yeah, it's not airtight. So it's training was super chill. You're just on your toes during training lines. You're getting asked questions by your lead gun, or if there's an evaluator, an instructor on board. You're just being put through the ringer to make sure you're proficient. Downrange, a totally different animal and how you operate. You operate with the lights off. It's just a green light, and you have a little, probably a headlamp around your neck with a red light, because it's lights out downrange. We operate at night, so you have to learn how to function in the dark, and usually without your checklist. Even though you're supposed to use your checklist, if you're in combat, you don't have time to sit there and flip through a book to figure out what to do. If you're shooting, troops are probably in contact, and you want to be quick, proficient. So yeah, it was a lot of learning at all times.
That checklist, did it eventually, are you drilling through that and so to the point where it's a second nature for you then?
It is, yeah. If you had a evaluation to where you're being tested, you probably took the time to read each step. But if you're a proficient gunner and you're downrange and like you're deployed, they expect you to be able to do everything without that checklist. 100%.
So after training, then were you deployed, or is your unit deployed right away, or do you have some downtime here?
The 4th SOS was one of the most deployed squadrons of the Air Force. The gunships were. They're pretty much deployed at all times. I can't speak to what the J models are doing, but to my knowledge, they also are deployed at all times. You could pretty much deploy as much as you wanted, as to my understanding. I never really fought for deployments, but I deployed once a year or so. I got out of training, I think, in August or so, and I deployed that December, late December.
And you went over to Afghanistan, correct?
Yep. I was in Afghanistan for all 3. That's where we were for all of ours. Bagram. So it is the best way I could describe it. Every time I got off the rotator coming in country was dusty, and I hated it. The second I got off the plane, I was like, I can't wait to be back home where there's fresh air, because I get off the plane in Afghanistan and I could just taste the dust in the air. And yeah.
So for you, what's it like going out on your first deployment? Of course,
so I was nervous. I was also excited. You don't know what to expect. You learn a lot, from your crew. You learn a lot from the missions. You learn pretty fast because you're flying so much. First off, the one thing that surprised me so much that I wouldn't have expected was how often the Afghan natives would be active at night. Like, shouldn't you be in bed? And you'd see a farmer out at the middle of the night farming, and be like, that's pretty suspicious. He's so many 100 yards away from the friendlies. Like, he's probably not friendly. But it happens so often, you're like, all right, well, I guess that's just what they do to avoid the heat, is they farm in the middle of the night. So you see a lot of weird stuff, especially on the gunships, since you have a bird eye view of the entire landscape.
Sure. And
that is the most advantageous time for them to farm.
Yeah. I just remember
it's like 2-3 in the morning, they'll be out there.
Right. Yeah, I
Digging the
remember
irrigation ditches. Yeah, no, that's
Same way,
usually
remember
they're not. It's nothing nefarious.
nefarious. Yeah,
No.
being a new guy, like I remember hearing about it. Like they talk about farmers being up, and I was like, "There's no way that's just a farmer." But yeah, I quickly learned that it's pretty common for people just to be doing random stuff in the middle of the night.
And for you being so, how many guys are on a crew for AC-130U?
So for the U model, we had 13 to 14. We flew with 5 aerial gunners, which was my job. You'd have one person in the right scanner window, just looking out of a window the whole night for threats or tracer fires. You'd have one guy in the bubble acting as a load master, where you were just had your head hanging out of that bubble. You had a bird's eye view of the whole landscape. So if there was a fire or a tracer fire or anything that happened, headlights from a vehicle, you saw it. Um, you're there to look for threats and dispense defensive maneuvers if you had to. Um, and the other 3 are on the gun deck. So one person is pulling the brass out of the 105. The other person is operating the 105. And the third guy, he'll put the 25 on the line, like make it ready to fire. From there, it's
Mhm.
pretty much automatic. And he'll load the 40 millimeter and handle all the malfunctions that will inevitably happen. Um,
And what's it? I mean, you guys are in your own little world when you're working up there. I mean, on a previous episode, I got to talk to a World War II crew chief, and he mentioned, when he first met the pilots, he said, when we're down here on the flight line, salute, call me sir, but when we're up there, my name's Joe, or whatever his name is. I mean, was it a little bit more relaxed like that for you, or is it still?
That's and it's different per aircraft, but the standard is that there is no rank on aircraft to where you talk to an officer, and even if you had like a major lieutenant colonel, if they're doing something or they're in your way, you move them out of your way, tell them what they need to do. In the gunship community, and it's like this in a lot of spec ops communities, it was really lax. And I hear a lot of people who get surprised about the stuff we've done with our officers and around our officers, to our officers. Um, the 4th SOS, obviously there is a difference in rank. And if it came time to it, we'd respect the rank. But as a whole, I feel comfortable saying most things I would to my regular, like enlisted, coworkers as I would an officer. Um, yeah,
what was
it's
And
your
very
then,
tempo
unique.
like? What was your operational tempo like? Like how many missions were you flying a day or?
Oh my God. So it's dependent on the time of year. Winter's usually pretty slow. So my first deployment, when I first got there, I had a bad, I guess, view of what it was like. I had a bad idea of the ops tempo because it was snowing. It was January. We flew 6 times in January. So to me, I was like, oh, this is easy. Like, we didn't fly very much. We were really just hanging out. And then it became springtime where we were flying every single day, talking like 8 to 12-hour missions, like overhead. It gets to a point to where you have flight hours and flight limitations you're not supposed to break. They sign waivers for that stuff, and they say you're flying anyway. Uh, it got pretty fast, and you shot a lot, and it was busy. You made the time to work out at the gym and to do laundry when you were on the ground. Other than that, you know, you were you were flying.
well, back in January, then, I mean, what are you doing during your downtime? I imagine trying to take time to get the maintenance
We
on the gunship done and
So
and that.
downrange is that's the time when you work out a lot. You work out a lot. For us, we weren't doing anything in at the time. We weren't flying so much. I played a lot of Catan, man. I learned that game in and out. We played a lot of board games. We actually held a Gunship Olympics at one point. Was my crew versus the other crew. Each crew picked like the events. I mean, we did God, what were some of them? One of them was one person from each crew had to run, I think, 10 laps around the dormitories, and after every lap, they had to down an O'Doul's beer, which is a alcohol-free beer. Uh, we had another one where one member from each crew member had to finish an MRE. Whoever finished an MRE the fastest one. So we kept ourselves entertained with stuff like that. Um, man.
But once like you're saying, back come springtime is down to the brass tacks then.
Yeah, once you start flying and you get busy, it's down to brass tacks.
So, I mean, so who are you supporting when you're out on when you're doing flying missions? Are you supporting your, I guess, typical ground troops? Are you on deck for other spec ops?
Nope,
Uh,
it's a spec ops thing. So we supported gosh, a number of different spec ops nationalities from Europe. We supported mainly Army Rangers most of the time. We supported Afghan spec ops who are usually accompanied by Army Rangers or Air Force ground controllers. Um, gosh, a number of people. I mean, it was really interesting to see the variety of like badass door kickers there were from different countries, um, and just get their thanks, after a mission. There are a lot of really cool people we got to work with.
did you ever have the chance to meet the guys later on base, or?
Oh yeah, there was a number of ops we went on to where either that night after we landed, we went back to ops, or either maybe the next day, they would come in and they want to either review the tapes or give us their thanks. Sometimes they give us um, remember like just not I want to say war trophies, but just little tokens of affection, I'll say. Um, yeah, the Brits were really fun to work with. I'll say those were some really funny guys. Um, Real badasses.
So supporting role, I imagine you can't do anything unless they call in support. I mean, if shit really hits the ceiling fan, I mean, what's it like then for you guys up in the air?
Uh, so it's interesting. So as a gunner, when I wasn't scanning in the bubble or scanning the right window, we're really just sitting around waiting for something to happen. I'll go into the sensor booth and I would watch the feed. You listen to radios, you got all kinds of comms up, and you just BS. Sometimes I just sit there and read a book and wait for something to happen. And then usually you'd hear stuff start to spin up. You'd hear this guy's moving this way, this is happening, and you kind of get those cues to like get ready in case something goes off. And it can happen pretty fast. We were in Helmand once, Helmand province, just watching. We're actually supporting a regular army convoy, but we were there just because they knew that that area was controlled by the whole village was controlled by ISIS, and they were trying to clear that out. Um, and then there was nothing happening, and out of nowhere, it was like 60 or so ISIS fighters like popped up in a trench line because they had been using mud covered blankets to cover their IR feed, like their heat signature, and they had
Mhm.
planned this whole ambush. So stuff like that can happen. You have flights where you didn't shoot at all and nothing popped off. That's a lot of the time, but you never knew. Um, yeah.
So decompressed, that's the word I was looking for. So you're in a decompressed airplane, at 10,000 feet. I mean, what's it like when one of those guns goes off? I mean, I imagine you're wearing ear protection, or is that not a standard issue?
You're supposed to. Yeah, you usually put in ear protection and you had your headset on. I'll say that the 105 isn't as loud as you would imagine. I know it's a cannon, but it
Mhm.
was more of like a bass if you imagine that, just a light boom. Same thing with the 40. It was loud, but louder than that is the aircraft props itself. Like you said, it's a decompressed airplane, so you hear everything on the outside. Um, so yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, my hearing is probably pretty shot at this point, but
Steve, I think you brought that up on last week's episode that it's not service related. Seems to be the standard line.
If you don't complain about it, then yes, they'll be like, well, there's no paperwork, so guess it's
yeah,
not service related.
there were a number of no paperwork related things with the gunship. There were a number of times where they brought in like medical people to fly on the aircraft to do tests, and there was like a number of years ago they did an air quality test. And those doctors were like, you guys should be on oxygen at all time. You guys should have gloves on at all time. You should be, changing out of your uniform as soon as you land. And they were talking about you shouldn't be eating on the aircraft because there's so much lead in the air. And we're like, that's just how you have to operate. And the higher ups, I think they ended up shredding those reports because they were like, if this gets out, you know, they're not gonna be able to fly the gunships. So I'm waiting for my lung cancer to kick in any day now. We'll see.
After that, so how long were you in Afghanistan for that first deployment?
So we did pretty quick turnaround because we flew so much and you ran out of flight hours. You kind of became restricted. So my first deployment was 4 months. Compared to like, I know like my brother-in-law, he's deployed in the army right now. He's going to be gone for a year. To me, that is crazy. I can't imagine what you guys go through. Because yeah, our deployments were usually fairly short. Like 4 months, I'd say is an average. My next two deployments were both 3-month deployments. So yeah.
And come back from there. I mean, come back to imagine same base, the Hurlburt in Florida.
Right.
So what are you doing between deployments? Are you doing training workups, or do you have downtime to go out and
Yeah.
do other things?
It's a regular, I mean, so between deployments, you fly about 2 to 3 training lines a day. You know, which that'll, you know, could be a 10 to 12 hour workday. And then on the days you weren't flying, you had an additional duty. So you had another job where you'd be working as a scheduler, scheduling the flights. You could be working as mobility, making sure everyone's good to deploy. I worked MCC, which was basically the front desk receptionist clerk of the squadron, if you will. And then I got moved to resources, which is the one we were the ones who bought all of the gear. We paid the bills. We did the financing of the squadron, which was a really fun office to be in, helping to control the money. But
And what's your rank at this point?
I'm leaving as a staff sergeant,
Okay.
so E5.
And you mentioned in your email when we've been talking over the last couple months, so you had your tail swat, or your tail broke when you're down in Canada, or up in Canada, rather.
Right, yeah. So
was that between deployments, or were you leaving on deployment?
That was my last. After that, I didn't have any more deployments. That was one of my last times going down range. So we have tail swaps. Basically, you can't keep an aircraft in Afghanistan forever. You know, they have limitations. So what they do is they swap those aircraft out with stateside aircraft. You do that, you have to fly an aircraft over to Afghanistan, let them configure it, get an old aircraft that's been there for however many months, and fly that one back. It's called a tail swap. On the gunships, we're so heavy and they're so old, or the U models were, we broke a lot. So you end up breaking in convenient places. We legitimately did break in Newfoundland, Canada, which was our first stop. We were there for 8 days. So we got to experience snow, play around in the snow, meet some locals. I'm pretty good. I still keep in touch with a couple of them. Newfoundland, Canada was a great place to be stuck in for 8 days, I'll say. Yeah.
Where else have you been? Right, Afghanistan, the only place did the Air Force send you, or have you gone other places?
Afghanistan was the only place I was deployed. Of course, like you stopped at other places on the way, like Al Udeid and Kuwait. We did deploy. There were some that deployed to Turkey at one point, but that was short-lived. On the tail swap, I went to Newfoundland, Canada. We were in Rota, Spain for a minute. Azores, which is this island in the middle of the Atlantic. Greece, Italy. We were there for a night or two. I went TDY for like just training and work up to Washington State, around Tacoma, Washington, for a week or so. That was fun.
So, and what is TDY?
TDY, temporary duty, is basically they say, all right, you're gonna go. It's like a little vacation almost. They say you're gonna go do your job at this other base for a week or 2 or 3, just to get like a change in pace. You know, we actually went up there in relation to doing some testing for a certain company. So we didn't even shoot when we were up there. We were just flying around, and it was a fun TDY. But yeah, a lot of jobs. I don't know how it works in the Army. I'm sure they do the same thing or something similar. A lot of jobs will do TDYs where you go to another base for a bit and you enjoy another base. You get a little change in tempo, and hopefully you learn something from it.
Josh, Steve, did you guys ever do anything like that?
Oh,
Dang.
Carson was a black hole. Once you were there, it was not letting you go unless you got
Unfortunate.
out.
once you're assigned to your unit, you're pretty much there unless you promote or you reclass or do something. I mean, you can request going places. But, yeah. I don't know.
Hmm.
So, how often did your Casey? Did you? What was the attrition rate like for the crews? How often was like your commander changing or your? I don't know. I don't know the structure of what a crew is like.
So,
Or structure was in there, but so like, what was the rotation within the crew there?
so with crews, I mean, you flew with a different crew every time you flew home station. It was training line. Whoever was available to fly as a pilot and all that stuff. You're constantly flying with someone new. In the squadron itself, as far as command, that I feel like it was a pretty regular change of command that you would see anywhere else. Every year or maybe every 2 or 3 years, you get a new commander. Um, Downrange, when you deploy, that's the only time that you'll be flying with pretty much the same crew every day in and out. So you kind of build relationships with your crew. You have a standard that you all work on. You know what each person. You kind of have a norm that you're going to do with this set crew.
Strengths and
Um,
weaknesses and all that.
exactly, yeah. And you have crew things that you agree on, like, hey, if this happens, we're going to do this, X, Y, and Z, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So being trapped up in basically a tin can. I mean, imagine not that guys in their early 20s into their early 30s or so have egos or anything like that. But I mean, do you ever find yourself butting heads with one another?
Uh, there's been times, I mean, for the most part, crews got along pretty well. I can think of a few instances where like people didn't get along, and if it got severe, the command could say, all right, we're gonna swap the crews up a bit to mix things up. But you know, I think most people just get along pretty well in the gunship community. I can think of maybe one scenario to where me and I've lived with the same roommate the last like 4 years or so here at Herbert, but we had a prank war that got out of hand, and we
Go
got
on.
pretty mad at we got pretty mad at each other. It started with I was there for 10. I was just there for 10 days. I was doing that tail swap tour. I bought a plane downrange. I was bringing one back, so I was only there to drop off a plane and bring back an old one. I was sleeping. He was there deployed, so he was there for a few months at this point. I got to sleep in since I wasn't doing missions, and he woke me up with a flashlight in my face and then a Nerf dart to the head. And I was like, what the crap? So naturally, he went on an op that night. So I had all the time in the world to, plan my revenge. I went outside. I filled a little rucksack with rocks, this salt rock they put everywhere on base. And I went up to his room and I put rock in all his stuff. I mean, like uniform pockets, sleeping bag, under his sheets, in his Tide Pod, in his shampoo bottle. And for whatever reason, I think he's a really big hair guy. When he got back, that's the thing that set him off, was that I put a rock in his shampoo bottle. So I was showering later, and he stole my towel and all my clothes. And I was like, come on, all right, cool. And I stood there and I was like, I'm not leaving the shower naked. Like, you're gonna bring that stuff back. And he brought me a trash bag and he put that there. And to get back to my room, I would have had to walk by like everyone. So me being that made me pretty mad. So what I did was, instead of going to my room, I went to his room. I grabbed his sheets and I wrapped myself up in his sheets to go back to my room naked. Went to his room. Um, at that point, he was mad I was naked in his sheets. So he literally dove naked into my bed and started rolling around. And our other guys who were in my room were like, what is going on? Like, what are you guys doing? And oh god, yeah, I forgot what happened after that. I talked about throwing his boots outside or something. Uh, One of our leadership was worried we were about to fight, and we didn't. We were friends, so we just kind of cooled off. We washed each other's stuff, and that was that. But yeah.
So on your downtime, were you able to get time to call back home, keep in touch with family and friends back here?
Oh yeah. I mean, luckily in this digital age, it's not like it used to be, like where you had to go wait at a, the toll phone or anything. You could literally just Skype, FaceTime to back home. So depending on how often you want to do that, you could probably find the time of day before and after an op to call your wife, significant other, kids, wherever you wanted to.
And I imagine obviously you can't talk about everything that you're doing, but I mean, do they have like a do and don't list, if you will, for when you're talking to friends, family, whoever?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the stuff that you shouldn't talk about is obvious, like, as far as like when you're about to go out on an op and like what you're doing.
OPSEC.
OPSEC, yeah. They called it River City. There'd be periods to where they literally turned off all the Wi-Fi and everything. That way people couldn't talk to people back home, because they were afraid that people would, let out certain information. Usually it's unfortunately when someone would pass away, the Wi-Fi would go out. That way it didn't like slip out in an inappropriate manner. So it was always kind of a real bummer when the Wi-Fi would go out. If you weren't on the app, you knew that somewhere something happened. I don't know how much detail I can go into that, but you can imagine that's something I never really told my family about. I was like, you don't want to tell your family that if you're not getting in contact with them for 2 or 3 days, it means that someone might have passed away. Because then if you can't contact them, they might be worried it might be you. But
Right.
that was something I remember happening a lot.
But go back to your deployments and your second and third. I mean, what are some of your favorite memories or better stories that you have from those days?
Oh God, man, there's a lot. I mean, we had a lot of good ops. I think the favorite thing about going out on the gunships was just the thanks we got. You'd be surprised. I know you think about gunships, you think that it's a killing machine. It's there to kill, but it's more there. We looked at it as a protection thing. We're there to save lives, save the lives of the ground troops, give them that warm fuzzy that we're overhead and we're watching over them. So just getting the gratification from them was always really rewarding, and knowing that we could be there for them. There were a lot of funny stories I could share. There's almost too many to share.
I got all afternoon. The Packers don't play till 3:30.
There's one that I don't know why. There's one that comes to mind right now. There was our engineer wanted some duct tape, so he called back to the gun deck over comms. Said, "Hey, can I get one of the gunners to bring me like 6 inches of duct tape?" And this new gunner, bless him, he was such a go-getter. He was like, "I'm on it." He went up there with probably about like a tiny piece, like 2 strips, like a 2-inch strip of duct tape. And the engineer called back and he was just like, "Is this your idea, 6 inches?" So from then on, we called it after his name. I won't say it, but we said like his name, I'll make something up, like the Casty 6-inch, which you knew to be like way less than it was, to be like 2 inches or something. God.
He's talking about grid squares.
What's a good square now?
Nothing. Grid squares, something you would tell some private. Hey, go ask. Go ask.
Grid square.
Yeah,
Go Google it, Gordon.
No, I heard good, like GOOD, and I'm like, I know what a grid square is. I've been told you're supposed to keep a box of those on hand at all times.
You tell the first, you tell a private, go ask the first sergeant where a pricky 8 is,
For us, it was a flight line. You tell someone to go get about 6 feet of flight line.
Yeah.
I feel like, what?
Well, yeah, for the radios, we always did squelch fluid. Go find the squelch fluid. The radios need squelch fluid. Some
I think
walking all over the freaking, all over the area. Hey, Sergeant, you seen the squelch fluid?
my favorite was still the suspension on the Bradleys. We'd have a kid get up on the Bradley and jump up and down on it in different spots to test the suspension, and he'd be up there for an hour just fucking jumping on the Bradley.
We'd give him a piece of chalk and a ball peen hammer and tell him to go test the armor for weak spots.
Yeah, we did that one too.
You go out to the motor pool and all the freaking Bradleys are all freaking, they're all freaking beat up with white circles all over. The first sergeant's just going insane with rage.
We gave a kid a trash bag and told him to get an exhaust sample from the Bradley and take it to the mechanic. And he's just fucking walking around the motor pool with a bag of exhaust. And they're like, we don't want that shit. Go give it to your PL. And PL's like, I don't want that shit. Go give it to first sergeant. They kept sending him around. Eventually he got to one of the supply guys. Supply guy's like, what the fuck is in that bag anyway? It's an exhaust sample.
Yeah. There was, I think that's pretty much universal.
Yeah.
Every branch of service has their own freaking, the fuck games, as we used to call them.
Casey, did you have to go through any of that? Any of your guys above you give you shit?
Yeah, I got a little shit. Luckily, my first crew downrange was pretty. They're pretty nice and tame. One of the common things. It goes back a long ways. I don't know how frequent it is now. Everything's got to be PC, and some people get offended. What gunner hugs. So basically, the gunship's blacked out. You can't see where you're going. And someone would, the pilot, engineer, someone from the booth, a sensor operator, FOCO, whoever, come back to use the bathroom because the bathroom's way in the back on the gun deck. So you'd black out all the lights so where they can't see where they're going. They'd be feeling around, and you could. Sometimes a gunner would just like strip naked and hide somewhere and then jump out and scare somebody. Oh man. So if you ever see the term gunner hugs, it pretty much means like guys probably naked, probably gonna pounce on you. Yeah, some people you got in trouble in that from time to time, but yeah. Ridiculous.
Very serious business up there.
Oh yeah. We fool around a lot.
So which weapon system did you run again?
So the U models had a 105 millimeter, 40 millimeter, and a 25 millimeter.
So you knew how to work all three of those, or were you just tasked to one?
No, you as a gunner, you knew all three of them, and you're more. Imagine you're more of like a mechanic / the loader. If any of the gun malfunctions, you knew how the gun operated in and out. You knew how to fix it. The 25 is a giant Gatling gun, like it's pretty much self-operating. You knew how to safe it if the computers messed it up, because it was just all electronics on that thing. The 40 millimeter was a lot of just moving parts, little pieces, so it broke a lot.
Did you ever get to go up there and work the guns? Like, you ever get to go up there and shoot like for target practice, or because I assume you guys do a lot of training with targets and everything. But so did you ever get to go up there where the guy who was running the
Yeah. So in training, there was a few times where I got to operate the sensor operators, little track handle and shoot it there. We also had manual fire. So in the back, there were times when the gun would malfunction to a point to where the sensor operator couldn't shoot it. So we would manually be firing the gun. The sensor would aim and he'd see it ready, fire. And then we'd set it off. On the 105, you had a lanyard. So that was the funnest part. Where you get to pull the lanyard and the cannon goes off.
That sounds like fun.
It was a blast.
There's some debate on one of the pictures you sent me between some of the guys from our fraternity. You're holding a shell, and on it says "To ISIS from Theta Chi." Is that a 105? Because somebody asked me, and I said it looks like a 22 caliber to me, but
it's a 105. Yeah, that's one of the 105s.
That was a 40, wasn't it?
I had a few different pictures. I think the one that said "To ISIS" was a 105. The only thing I drew, I think on 40s, I would draw little faces on them before they go in the gun. Sometimes.
Yeah, it looks like he sent me a picture with some spent 40 mil, I believe, just looking at the picture. But on your ship, so there's a picture of you're standing in front of looks like a concrete barricade. Has the Hondo and the Maximum Carnage, are those two gunships that you were on, or is one yours, one someone else?
Yeah.
Or another crew?
1056, which I think was Hondo, was the one that we primarily flew on. That was my first deployment. My pilot at the time, who was he was an amazing pilot, Sharp. He decided to give me this little mission, a little side task where he's like, hey, I kind of want to leave some heritage behind. I really want to paint the barriers with the gunships, like what it's done. So I took the time to go to a place to cut out the little stencils and cardboard, the little people and the houses and the vehicles, and make a little stencil gunship and spray paint the barriers. And they're still out there, which is pretty neat that was left behind.
Yeah, just looking at it, I'll make sure to post it on Facebook and Instagram for people listening. But it looks like you guys were really busy up there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my first deployment. And it was pretty fast paced.
You guys were nicer than we were. We always just made fun of somebody. Like, I think all over Iraq, there's Penny loves the cock and pretty much 3 different cities, 4 different cities.
Nice.
But yeah,
And as we were talking before, you're on your exit now from the Air Force. What's it like coming home now for the last time, getting ready for your retirement?
It was my experience was very unique in that I literally retired. I'm one of the last qualified U model gunners on it. Like I retired the gunship, me and like 5 other gunners. Everyone else has already moved off to train on a new aircraft. And since it was retiring, like this past year has been pretty chill in the military, so to speak. So I got to kind of hang out at home a lot. Got to spend some time to focus on what I'm going to do as I get out. Travel a little. COVID, I was supposed to travel a lot, but obviously COVID and everything, I didn't get to do any of that. It was surreal to be coming out of this. It's a sensation similar to, like I said, that pivotal moment in your life to where you're leaving high school to go to college or college to go to your real job. This is something that's a totally different animal because you're not only leaving your lifestyle, like you're moving to a new job, but you're leaving behind something that you're not gonna, I don't know, experience again, probably unless you re-enlist.
has the Air Force given you any transition? I mean, what's the Air Force transition training like? I'm assuming that they gave you some, of course, but
Yeah, I did it's called TAPS, Tuition Assistance Program, and you did like this 1-week course. I did mine super early. I did mine like a year ago. Most people do it like a few months before you get out. They go through like, here's what you could expect from the VA. Here's some benefits they're going to give you. They do a little like career exploration program for like, let's see what careers match up with you. And they try to make sure you have a set plan. If you want to, they go over resumes with you. They do like mock job interviews if you want to do that. It was an interesting little program. I feel like most people, if you're getting out, you already have an idea, but if you don't, they definitely do their best to help.
And talking to a lot of guys, especially in Army or Marines, if you're 11 Bravo infantry, that doesn't really translate into a civilian job. I mean, have you thought about if you're going from
bullshit? I could be a fucking janitor.
Yeah.
Do they give you like a packet? Like
I can relate. This? Yeah, I can relate because there is no civilian aerial gunship gunner. I've heard of people who like that's what they do. They take your experiences from the military and they translate that into like real world resume language. I did my best to do that on my own. I might still like reach out to someone to try to help them, because there is stuff that you while operating a gun on the gunship may not mean anything to anyone outside. The stress levels and the level of learning you have to go through, leadership, all that kind of stuff does translate. I mean,
it's a matter of rewording it on the resume.
Right. And then outside of that, since I was a flyer, we had additional duties like office jobs when we weren't flying. So you had a little bit of that to put on a resume as well. So
anything lined up that have you thought about using your law enforcement degree at all, or going back to school with the GI Bill?
I don't think I'm gonna dabble in law enforcement. To be honest with you, no. I considered it for a while. I don't think that's at that point. I may as well stay military. Yeah. So right now, my plan is to focus on my current job, even though I don't make a paycheck like a monthly paycheck. I'm a real estate agent in Florida. I got my license. I've been kind of dabbling in it. I at least want to take a month or two to learn it. I've had a couple of job offers outside of real estate, here and there, that I'm going to consider. And I like to reserve my GI Bill. I like to use it eventually because I mean, at that point, you're getting free housing allowance and you're
Yeah,
educating
you gotta
yourself.
use it. You gotta
Yeah.
use it. That's the best thing you get out of the military.
Oh
You ever
yeah.
thought about you ever thought about like going to like a trade school or something? You know, like
I did. I looked into that for a while. Everyone I know keeps, everyone who knows me, keeps trying to talk me into doing carpentry because I know I like doing that on the side as a hobby. I don't think they understand that carpentry in the real world, it's a little different than just doing it as a hobby. But I've looked into a lot of trade school stuff because I think that's, we need more of that. That's something that's really easy to get into. You're learning a genuine skill. You're not just taking BS, general, English, math, that kind of stuff. Um, I I've considered right now. I'm waiting till the fall before I even use it because I want to take my time. I don't want to waste the GI Bill on something I'm not going to use. I've considered dental hygiene, and I've considered HR, either getting like another bachelor or just getting a master's in human resources because that's something that translates across the board in any field.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it'd be useful.
Well, you shouldn't even have to do any of the bullshit general classes because you already have a bachelor's,
See, that's what I thought
right?
too, but I know I looked into dental hygiene because I was like, that pays well. Their hours are pretty good generally, and I
Yeah.
think I'd be interested in it. But I went to a local college to see what their program looked like, and they did have prerequisites, some of which I don't have. So it was like microbiology, chemistry labs, stuff that I didn't have going to be a bachelor in criminal justice. So there's definitely still prerequisites that I would need to go to certain, things.
Oh yeah, definitely. I just meant like as far as saying like you got to have, a
You're right.
global perspectives class and all that
Right.
bullshit they make you do. You shouldn't have to redo that.
Yeah, I shouldn't. I was just kind of giving credit to he mentioned trade schools, and I think
Yeah.
if I didn't have a bachelor's, that's definitely something I would be looking at is trade schools because that's where um, a lot of jobs are hurting. Like they need more trade school people, and it's something that you're literally just learning a direct skill. You're not really wasting time, I'd say.
Have you thought about something in STEM too? Because especially with an Air Force background, like one of the guys that I work with is prior Air Force who he hasn't even used his GI Bill. He got his degree while he was in the Air Force and got hired almost immediately after getting out.
I'm not surprised. I'm not really too familiar with what STEM is or does, but I know I looked
science.
online at one point
It stands
at
for science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing.
Yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah, I only recognize the word because I looked at clearance jobs. That
Mathematics, not manufacturing. Sorry, mathematics.
Yeah.
mathematics, okay.
Well, I mean, I just thought that because you talked about how a lot of the trade programs have a deficit right now
Hmm.
in skilled workers, but the same goes for most of the STEM fields, and most of those pay pretty well.
I'd actually probably look into it because yeah, I looked at clearance jobs where they're looking for people who already have like a secret or TS
Yeah.
clearance, and that's one that pops up consistently is STEM.
Now you're about to be, or you're going to be out here soon. Have you had that inkling to reverse course and hit the
Oh,
reenlist button?
oh god, that happened for the entire past year. I had someone in my leadership who was a great guy. He genuinely just wanted me to do what was right for me. He texts me re-enlistment bonus rates all the time, and he texts me all the facts about employment, unemployment. He's just kind of trying to veer me because we had a 3 times multiplier bonus right now. So like if I re-enlisted and stayed in my career field, I would have gotten, you know, uh I'll say like maybe like $16,000 up front and then another 16 or so throughout my career in bonus. So trying to turn down $30,000 to $40,000 somewhere between there was not easy to do, I'll say. But
Well, how old are you now? I know there's a 34 is a cutoff, I believe.
I am 29 now.
Okay. So do you think, well, what if you go into the civilian workforce for a little while? I mean, it's just not working out for you, or maybe you're not happy. You think maybe you'd look at the Air Force, or
I would consider reserves. I'll say that's part of the reason why I got out when I did. I know people who they re-enlisted their first time, and I'm like, if I re-enlist once and I do another 5 or 6 years, at that point I might as well do 20. If I'm gonna
Yeah,
get
that's what
out,
happens.
yeah, if I'm gonna get out, I
Yeah.
need to get out my first enlistment while I'm still under 30, barely, and I have time to build, you know,
Build
build
a
up my
career.
experience in
Yeah.
a different field while I'm still
Mhm.
young.
Yep.
That's smart. That's really
Yeah.
smart.
That's smart. 'Cause
What's
that's
up?
what happens. Guys hit 10 years and then they're like, well, then fuck it. I might as well do 20.
Yeah, they get nervous or they see a bonus
Yeah.
and they're afraid they're not going to find work or do well on the outside, and that fear makes them re-enlist. And
It's a
you're at that
scary.
point,
It's really scary.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
it's a
is.
scary thing that especially as you start getting older, that starts becoming a big dark cloud that's just kind of
yeah,
following you around, and you start to question like, well, what the hell am I gonna do? I don't know.
it is scary. Even
I,
I mean, I know people who actually did retire and they still. I heard they told a story in Taps. There was some like chief or senior master sergeant, someone who made really well in the Air Force, their whole career. They retired and ended up like going bankrupt just because like they didn't know what to do. They spent all their money. They bought like all this lavish stuff and like some people just don't know what to do on the outside. Uh,
Because I read a statistic somewhere where it's like almost 95% of the people who win the lottery,
they,
almost like 95% of them end up declaring bankruptcy because they go out and they're like, party, yeah,
yeah,
hookers and blow.
and instead of investing that money in like real estate or stocks or something responsible or
Yes,
yeah.
budgeting, yeah,
or they just start going out and buying cars and buying houses and buying their family cars and family houses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
yep, yep.
Next thing you know, you're in over your head and underwater.
It's just people who don't know, who never had that money and don't know what to do with it responsibly. So
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like I always used to tell, what I always used to tell my privates when I was a squad leader, when they'd ask me like, what should I do, Sarge? Should I get out? Should I re-enlist? I'd be like, you got to do what's right for you. But if you're going to get out, have a plan.
yeah,
Like, know what you're going to do. And it's not like, last minute, like, all right, fuck it, I'll go do welding or whatever. Not, I mean, that's a perfectly viable career option, but there was a lot of guys who just like panicked at the last minute. They're like, I'm going to go do that. Like you need to start planning like a year out
right.
and figure out like what you're going to do. Are you going to go back to school? Are you going to try to get a job right away? Like as long as you have that plan, it's a lot less scary.
Right. You need to have finances saved up while you're in the military so you can have that nest egg. And then you need to have plan and then realistic expectations, I think would be the biggest thing. Just
Yeah.
understand what you're getting into.
Does a question for all three of you, and something that kind of come up in my work field as of recent. Does the Army tell you or teach you, give you a class about 401k, Roth IRA, or anything, putting your retirement egg away? Or is it, oh, here's a piece of paper, look at it when you can?
no,
They do, but it's like,
It's
it's
very
a couple
general,
hours and
basic.
you're done. It's pretty basic.
yeah, it's basic. But I mean, the Army. I know the Army and the Guard have their own kind of retirement plans as well. You know, I can't speak for the Air Force or anything, but I know several guys. In fact, the guy that I invest with myself, he was in the Army with me, and he got really interested in it because he started digging a little bit more into it, and then he made it his career path once he retired. Well, he's getting ready to retire out. But yeah, there's some pretty good programs within the Army that within I think within all the service branches really that gets you kind of prepared for what you're going to do. But in all honesty, it's only the older guys who kind of really take notice of it, or the guys who have it, or people who are interested in finance to begin with. Because I can tell you, like, the only reason I started looking into it was because my wife, who is an accountant and who was really interested in stuff like that, was sitting there going, "Hey, you need to find out about this. This is a good idea." I mean, other than that, I was like, shit, yeah, man, we're gonna go drink beer and go shoot guns. So I mean, but once you start getting into it a little bit, it's actually really, I thought, really kind of interesting. There's some cool stuff, but young kids, when you first start in, those younger guys, they don't care about that stuff. It's unless they're really smart or they have a natural tendency or inclination towards it. But yeah, most of them just want to go out and buy the newest, hottest, latest car and throw some rims on it and the dope ass freaking sound systems.
With 23% APR.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, yeah. The old Mustang.
yeah.
Oh,
Our drill
Mustang,
sergeants,
Camaro. Yeah.
yeah, I remember being in basic, and our drill sergeants would yell at guys, don't do that shit, don't do it. And sure shit, everybody went out and did it.
It was always don't buy a nice car right out of basic.
Yep.
And don't marry a stripper. And like I'd say like half the guys fuck that up.
Oh
I'd
my
say
God.
three-quarters of those guys went out and bought a freaking stupid ass car and married a stripper,
Yeah.
or some kind of dependopotamus.
Hippopotamus, yeah. We had a guy in our unit had to get he was TDY. They're just it was because of a hurrivac. We hurrivaced the aircraft to Arkansas because a hurricane was coming in. So he was in Arkansas and he literally his cards got declined at a restaurant. People were like, "Why are your card? You're in the military. Why do you have no money?" He found out his wife had spent everything like shopping around, and she didn't work. She stayed at home. So they forced him to go to finance and really sit down. And that happens all the time. People,
Yep.
just lose
Yeah.
track of it.
And Casey, for you, I mean, Josh mentioned there's some programs. I mean, what's the Air Force offer? Do they kind of help you out with that?
So I mentioned TAPS, the transition assistance program. When you get out, they make you do that 1-week course. They do go over finances. They go over like, let's look at a budget. What are you realistically spending? There's a guy that you can go to. They call him Money Mike, I think. He's all about finance and investing. And if you ever have problems, you can go to him and he'll talk to you about it. There's nothing that they really force on you as far as financing. Most people like leadership are going to tell you to invest in your TSP or Roth to a certain degree. A lot of people are going to advise you to look into real estate, but it's really on you, the individual, to take an interest in it or not. Yeah.
So then, and going back to getting out, and as you're doing all this, and you said, guys are trying to talk you into staying. I mean, friends and family outside of the military, I mean, where they sit on that?
So everyone in my leadership that I've talked to, they generally have the same, like, I'm glad you have a plan. You have everything set up, so I think you're going to be just fine. My friends generally say the same thing, that it looks like I have a really good plan, but it really doesn't matter how good a plan like I make for myself or how big of a nest egg I make for myself. I'm still going to be nervous and worried, but that's just part of life. You can never be too, for me at least, I feel like you can never be too prepared. But most people seem to think that I'll be just fine.
So then, now that you're all but out, what'd you say has been the biggest challenge over your career?
The biggest challenge of my career. Wow, that's a good one.
And on the flip side of that, what's been the biggest reward for you?
I could say for the reward part, there are a few moments that come to mind as I've been really proud. Like I said, anytime we did an op and like the ground guys would come thank us, that was really rewarding. That in itself, knowing that someone appreciated what we do and that we genuinely helped someone was really rewarding. I was someone who generally tried at everything I did. So I made honor graduate from basic. So my parents being there to see that, even though it was like a small thing, some people think it's dumb to be a top 10% or whatever. I was really like happy about it. I did the same thing for Airman Leadership School when I went to be a staff. You go through ALS where you go through this course with everyone else going to be a staff sergeant. I made distinguished graduate for that. And my parents showed up for it, so that was really rewarding. That they got to see that and see all my leadership there, and it was a really proud moment for me. As far as the most challenging thing, it was definitely training, I'd say, initially when I first got to Herbert Field. Learning this gunship, there were so many things you need to learn and stay proficient in, and so many emergency procedures, so many malfunctions, so many pieces of knowledge. And if you had everything memorized, they were going to find the gaps. They're going to look inside the regs of hundreds of pages and find something that you didn't know and say, hey, you know, how fast do we need to be going for the windshield wipers to work, or something random like that, and you'd have to find it. So I'd say keeping up with your learning pace was one of the most challenging parts.
Tactically and technically proficient.
Yes, staying proficient was big.
So I got a question. So you're getting out. Is there a significant other that is influencing this decision, or?
Nope. It's actually the opposite. I've this past year, I've almost been. I mean, I've had a girlfriend that, but she was leaving because she's in the military. So if anything, I've been avoiding. I don't want to say avoiding relationships, but I've been keeping myself more or less not tied down. I don't have, you know, I don't have kids. I don't have a wife right now. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a dog right now, which although I really want one, I recognize if I get one, it's going to tie me down. There's nothing tying me to one spot, which I like right now, and I have all the savings I would ever need. So I am quite literally as free as you could be as a 29-year-old single male to uproot myself and go wherever I want. That being said, I
Vegas.
don't think I
All
will.
right, you're going to Vegas. Baby.
Yeah, I say that like I'm not tied down, but realistically, I know I'm staying in the area so I could be around my friends.
What part of Florida? What part of Florida are you in?
Herbert Field, it's in Fort Walton, so it's close to like Pensacola, Destin, Navarre. It's the Emerald Coast, the nice sandy beaches.
Yep. I'll
It's
be there
good.
in 2 weeks, so in a couple of weeks, I'm
Uh,
gonna be over by the Gainesville area visiting some family.
oh, nice. It's
Go
great,
down to
man.
Tampa and Cedar Key and all that. So
Sweet, yeah. It's a great place to be.
yeah, my dad seems to like it. So he retired down there.
A lot of people retire down here.
Yeah, it's the law or something here. Especially if you're like from New York, you got to go to Florida or some crap.
Yeah, we get a lot of retirees, Canadians, local people on vacation from Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, all those places. All the South just floods in.
Well,
But last question for me: what kind of advice do you have or would you give to someone that's about to go into the military, or they're looking to go in, and what advice would you give to somebody they're on the fence of either should I get out or should I reenlist?
So if you're going to go into the military, I'd say don't rely on one person's word. No matter what branch you go into, Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force, whatever, everyone's experience is going to be slightly different. Some people in the Air Force are going to tell you that it's grueling. You have to work 6 to 4, but that's not true for every job. Mine was super chill. Some people in some branches are going to tell you they loved it. Some are going to hate it. It just depends on you yourself and whether you not like to travel. It's joining the military is literally just rolling dice. You don't know where you're going to be stationed. You can't guarantee what your job is going to be. So you're taking a chance to go do something, and it's worthwhile. You'll gain experience. You're going to gain friendships. You're going to travel. But just know you can't. You're not going to go into the military knowing exactly what you're going to do, where you're going to go. You are rolling dice, and you're going to get a lot. It's for the better, but yeah. As far as getting out, kind of like we talked about earlier, most people are really afraid of getting out because of you're losing that job security, that stable income. But there are so many opportunities out there that are available to you, and you have so many tools. It's really not as scary as it seems. I turned down a huge bonus to get out, and I'm still not really fretting about it because I mean, in this past week alone, like I was literally separating. I had someone come to me and talk to me about, going work for their company here or going over, about an hour away to be assistant manager here. And these things just kind of pop up unexpectedly. You never know what's going to happen. Um, just be prepared financially. Give yourself a career plan on what you want to do, where you want to go to school, and definitely put yourself out there. Let it be known that you're looking for work. LinkedIn is a great resource. There's a lot of
It
other great
is.
like hiring resources, and they throw jobs at you all the time, and it's crazy. Yeah.
Josh, Steve, anything else?
Oh, I got yeah. What's the like? What's the one thing that you're not gonna miss about the Air Force? I guess. And second part of that question is, I usually ask this of almost everybody that I talk to is, any regrets? Are there any regrets? But
Hmm. The one thing I'm not gonna miss about the Air Force is also the one thing I probably will miss, which is all the things you have to do, like that are actually it's the training. I'm not gonna miss all the random training. To deploy, having to go through, you have to have so many little things checked off. Make sure you have basically a checklist of things to do. And it's like that for everything in the military. Not having to deal with these giant checklists of things that most of which aren't relevant or don't matter to you. It's so nice to not have to deal with that stuff.
not
As
having to shave every day.
not having to shave every day. I grow out my hair, grow out a beard if I wanted, to the best of my ability. Uh, I'd say as far as if there's anything I regretted, uh, I wish I would have deployed more. I wish I would have fought to deploy more. I really didn't care for it. Like I was like, deploy me when you need me. I was that guy who was like, if you ever need me to hold alert or deploy, I'll do it, but I'm not gonna fight for it. And now I'm looking back, like that was easy money, and it's an experience that no one will ever get to experience again because that gunship is retired. So I think I should have done that more.
Cool, man. Right on.
Well, appreciate it, Casey. Thanks for coming on the show and taking time out of your afternoon. And I'm just gonna take care of the closing notes myself. And thanks for everyone popping on the stream. Really appreciate it. And we will catch you next time.
Cheers.
All right, thank you.